All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the High School Assessment Coordinator meeting for February. It's on February 14th, and we are going to be spending the vast majority of our time talking about ACT, final preparations for that, although we do have an opportunity to get together later on, either this month or early in March, prior to testing, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about pre-ACT. I know that you don't want to hear that, but guess what? It's coming as well. And then finally, DCYA, we're going to take a look at that. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and we'll go through the slide deck. As we go, if you have questions, please let me know, and we will address them. Or if you want to hang out after the meeting, we'll also address them there. So again, we're really going to focus on ACT because there's a lot of moving parts, but this is something that we need to make sure that we are focused on. That's the one that's coming first. We'll talk about pre-ACT, secure, the DCYA. Really not going to talk about the DLM or the forward, but if you have questions about that, we'll make sure that we address those. And as the ever-present opt-out process moves forward, we'll ensure that you know about that. And again, the team that's supporting you, even though I'm the one talking, I couldn't do this without all of these people and many more. Sarah Molnar and Jamie Anderson are both on the call. Stacy Will from Student Services really helps out with the accommodations portion. Ben Kolash, Leah Zapata-Vaughn also with the multilingual programs, and Lee Vierstra helps support with data and all things research for the high schools. So just want to keep that in mind. As always, we have the website, and we won't go there today unless you want to go there, but I've been building out and continue to build out the supports and resources for you on the ACT page, as well as on the assessment coordinators page. So that will all be there for you. And finally, just as far as resources are concerned, our department does have office hours every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m., and it is on this Google Meet link. It's also something that has been consistently in the agenda at the top of the page for you there. And we are there to support you and to answer any specific questions for you and your building. So let's jump into ACT preparation. First of all, communications. Please know that there is a communication plan that's being played out. If you are on MMSD social media, that has already been going for a little while. This is going to be in the admin bulletin this week. So by tomorrow, you'll see this. There is linked in the body of this ACT family communication template. So when you ask about the letter, that's where it's going to be. It is in Spanish and Hmong. It is also something that you can adjust for you and your school specifically. So using your own letterhead, etc. If you want more or you want something different, please let me know and let's talk it through, and I'll see what I can do as far as getting things to you as quickly as possible. So know that the communications letter is available, and I wouldn't suggest sending it out quite yet because we're talking about a month from now. We do want families to know that this is taking place. Probably somewhere around the first week in March, so the week before the test would be really good to get this to go home to families. Also in that letter, we'll talk about the pre-ACT secure testing dates. So the grades 9 and 10 only on the 16th of April. So both of them are in the same letter. We may have to adjust by giving you some more information for families the closer we get to, all right, yes, as we get closer to the date for testing, we'll get some more for the pre-ACT. We'll get another round out. Yes, Ben, thank you. It is in a Google Doc, and don't go ahead and make a copy for you or make changes for your school specifically, because again, it's being shared with everyone. Make a copy first and then put that in there. In fact, I may go in and put that in the letter itself. Copy first and then make the changes. So thank you, Ben, for the reminder. Also in the communication plan, this is in development with the communications team. This is something we did last year for the first time. It includes information like, why should I take this test? What resources are there? The information on how to prepare for the test. I just was in conversation with someone who kind of monitors what's going on in Zello Methodized, which is the test prep that we have available for all students. And they said that the number of people logging in and using that has shot up dramatically. So thank you to you and your team for sharing that resource with everyone, letting them know that it's there. Some classrooms may even be using, samples of questions in their content area. However you're using it, thank you. And this is a resource we continue to provide for all students, regardless of whether or not they're in grade 11, and all families. So everyone can have access to this through Zello. All right. Again, so you will get, you've got the district family newsletter. There will be something going out there, and I'll get you any kinds of changes, etc., for the family letter if you need them. And just so you know that is available now. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff, and I'm going to kind of jump around. And again, my apologies if it doesn't flow. It was coming as kind of top of mind as we were going through this. Accommodations, the window is closed for the first application, obviously. The reconsiderations had to be applied for by the 2nd of February. So where are we at in the process? The reconsiderations, that information should now be trickling in to you and your TAA person, and you will end up having this information prior to the test. It can come very late. Keep in mind that when a student does get accommodations, that the label that they get, the test booklet they have, will not come labeled for them specifically. For instance, if you have a timing code 6, it's not going to say Tim Peterson needs a timing code 6. You need to have that list so that you can match up the list of students with who has what timing code and what materials. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section as well. So if you are not on the Pearson Access Next platform, let me know. I think I've got everybody on there. I think I've gone through and double checked as well for the PreACT Secure. I will get you on if you just send me an email. There are several pieces of information that are available. Success.act.org is a really good website as far as getting data. So looking at data, both current and historical. Pearson Access Next obviously is where it's the workhorse. That's where things happen. The DPI and ACT training site is available. So if you are you wanted to go through and just review some of the information that they have, that would be great. The ACT Wisconsin website is actually, in my mind, the best site of all of these, because it takes you step by step through this process. And so in step 4, for instance, this is where it's like preparing the students for the test. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the near future. Now, where can you find all these links? The best place, the most concise place, is actually in Pearson Access Next. If you don't have a login and need one, let me know. The Wisconsin website is listed here, and you'll be able to see it's right here on the top. After you log in, it's over on the right-hand side of the page, and you'll be able to see Wisconsin ACT State Testing website. There's a lot of resources there. So what we're going to try and do is try and take you through some of the critical key components. And if I forget something at this point, and those of you who've been through it and it's like, oh, what about this? Today's the day to kind of jump in and add those things. So as far as I know, everybody should have had their material arrive. It was due to arrive this week. I know that some of it arrived on Monday, some on Tuesday, but regardless, when your material arrives, the first thing you need to do is inventory it. You need to make sure you know exactly what you have as far as standard administration books, the test administration material, the accommodated test booklets, etc. You need to know what you have of each. Make sure that it is located in a secure area, that the fewer people that have access to this, the better. If something goes wrong, you just don't want to have 12 people pulled in on something when it could have been 2 or 3. You do need to make sure that, I know that several of you have students who moved in and enrolled, working on getting your requests added. It's a slow process, but please keep that in mind. But you do have to order more material if you need it. And we'll take a look at where that is in just a moment. But I think the data pull for this was sometime in mid-January. So if anyone has arrived since then, they may need to have the test material. Now, if you want to order more material, it takes place in Pearson Access Next. So once you've logged in, go to the setup portion, and in that drop down, you'll see orders and shipment tracking. So that is where you would click on that, and it would ask you, you go through and you select what you want ordered. If you need more standard administration student test books or kits, then that's what you can order. If you need more accommodated test administration manuals, you can do that as well. But all of that information is right there in Pearson Access Next. All right, let's talk about time and some schedules, things to be thinking about. So there's a lot going on. There is a specific order for ACT. It has to be given in this order. It cannot be mixed up. Test 1 is English, and that takes 45 minutes. Now, these are test times. This is not preparation. Get the students seated, get the students identified, all of this, all of that, it takes place prior to the start of the first test. Test 2 is mathematics, and that is 60 minutes. The movement, the things that happen in between English and mathematics is pretty short as far as the time. It's reading the script that the proctors or test administrators have. And so it's just move from one section to another. After the mathematics section, there is a break. It's a 15-minute break. And in the past, what schools have done is had water and maybe a granola bar, something for students to be able to grab and take and eat in the hallway. They're not to have liquids and food in the testing rooms. I would suggest that you think about where students are located and have like centrally located, multiple sets of centrally located tables with this. So not all students are trying to come to one spot in the building. So again, think about where the students are. Say in this area, we're going to put a table with granola and water. We're going to have a person there to support and make sure that, there's enough. We'll have another one set up over here and maybe a third set up on the other side. So just to think about this ahead of time, the flow of where the test goes. Upon completion of break, students will come back and begin the reading portion of the test, and that is a 35-minute test. That flows into science, which is also a 35-minute test, and then there is a 5-minute break after science. Now, this puts us somewhere around, if I think we get started If you get started between 8:30 and 9, this puts you somewhere around noon-ish. It's a long morning. Now, we have said, and this is something that you just need to be aware of, that you can take a break for lunch. There are details about that specifically. However, we've also said, everybody has pretty much agreed that if you take a break for lunch, you're going to lose a whole bunch of people who won't come back and finish the testing. So a 5-minute break after science, and then the final portion is the writing test, and that is a 40-minute test. Test must be given in this order, so please keep that in mind.
Hey, Tim?
Yeah.
I just want to put out there that the bigger break after math, we do in the cafeteria for everybody, because people are taking breaks at different times. So if you set things out in the hallway, it'll disrupt other testers. So we get everybody away from the testing area completely, and then just keep an eye on them and have people get their kids back. But it's worked pretty well for quite a while. So I wouldn't recommend doing anything in the hallways that are near testing.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that from someone who's lived it, and I have not. So yes, you're right, because there's going to be, we have 45-minute and 60-minute assessments. There is just a variation that could be ever so slight, but you could get 5-7 minutes off. And you don't want students disrupting other students as they're going for that break. So thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Okay, so thinking about the schedule, where people are at, where you're going to do that break. Again, I don't recommend doing the lunch, but it is something that is, you do it for everyone or you do for no one. And so that is something to consider.
We do the lunch break for our accommodation students.
Yes, that's going to be the difference, is that for students who have, for instance, time and a half, that pushes them way beyond, their break is going to be very different than the standard time assessment. And then, so they will have time for lunch, and that is okay, because typically the rest of the students are almost done or done by that time. So yes, thank you. Now, other things that have to happen prior to test day is students need to complete an online MyACT account setup. That needs to happen prior to testing. It is not required that happens 2 weeks before, et cetera. You have time. So from now until March 12th, you have time to take students through this process. Or they have up to 2 days after the test, they can take this, go in and set up the account. So in either case, they set up a MyACT account, and there are a couple of documents which I will link in the resources on the agenda, the notes. I will put on the website, and if you'd like, I will even email you everyone these. One is a user guide for students, and the other is a user guide for test coordinators. So when students set up this account, because it's going to be linked to their state test versus the Saturday national tests, there is an access code. This access code is found in Pearson Access Next. And that Pearson Access Next process is found in the what's called the user guide. And this is my copy of the test coordinator. But one of the things I'd like you to check, and I believe that I know the answer to this, is when you look at your material that has arrived, in some states, in some times, ACT has a copy of a letter for students that includes their access code. So you just have to hand it out. That has not been the case in the past in the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if they've added that. So what we end up doing is we need to do a mail merge, pull their codes from Pearson Access Next. There's a template, a draft letter that you then fill in based on the student name and their access code, and it prompts them to go to the myact.org and to sign up for it that way. I will share those instructions specifically with you in a document. I will also share the test coordinators guide because there are some troubleshooting pieces. And one of the things that comes up is always, if I've already created a MyACT account for a Saturday test, do I have to do it again? The answer is yes, they need to do this because there are state-specific questions, but then those two accounts can be merged into one. Ben, you got a question?
Yeah, that we did get them. So we in
Okay.
the materials is a kit, and it has every single one. I did actually do a mail merge last year as well, just so that it went to a kid's account. But we do have the paper copies. You just have to sort them by however they're going to do the creating the accounts, and we do it in English classes. But so you'd have to take all of these and sort them by English class.
Yeah.
So
Which isn't as
the mail
helpful.
merge might be easier, but yes, it's a whole set of everybody in school.
That's good to know. But you won't have is those students who've been added since the data was pulled initially.
Yeah.
So you might have 10 or 15 students that you can just simply, you'll have to look them up, put their number in a blank template document and share that with them. But that's good to know that you actually have far more. They've added that. I don't believe that's something that they've done in the past. So there's also a user guide for students. I'm not going to suggest that we make copies for every student as it's 11 pages long. But I would have a few copies. If you're, for instance, Ben, you're doing things in English classes, I would probably have a few copies for every class, so at least they can see that, or post it someplace digitally, just so they can follow through the process, especially if they end up having questions or concerns. But there's always support for this through ACT.
They sent us the manuals too. We got 500 or so. So
well,
taking the ACT state testing spring 2024. So there's enough for every.
Perfect. And so I know, Jeff, you're new to this. Even if you are doing the online testing, this is something that students will need to be doing. We'll talk about this, but it's good that you have the printed resources. So we'll connect about that a little bit later. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you having that and letting me know that that's available. All right, some things to know. How do you tell the difference between standard administration materials and accommodation materials? They are different colors. They'll also have a different shape associated with them in the upper right-hand corner usually. So make sure that you keep them separate, that you know which color and which shape go with which, because you will need to know that. And once you get things, once that day comes around, you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure out things. So likewise, just kind of a reminder, those students who have similar accommodations or like accommodations, keep those as you're building out a schedule and to where every student is going to be, which room they're going to be in. Keep in mind that you cannot mix timing codes. So if a student has a timing code 3 and it says breaks as needed, and another one has a timing code whatever and it says extended breaks, that is not the same. You cannot put them in the same room, because what happens is you have to report on who is in every room, and ACT looks very carefully at this to determine whether or not the testing situation was as expected. If you put 2 different timing codes in the same room, even though they appear very similar, that is cause to essentially throw out the results from all of those students in those rooms. And since oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes students who are struggling academically may have accommodations. I don't want any student to have to retest. So if we can, ahead of time, be proactive and make sure that testing accommodations and timing codes are in the right setting together appropriately, that will go a long way to having students who feel like we didn't do things correctly, and families not happy either. So just keep some things to keep in mind. And so here are the test administration manuals. The red on the left is the standard administration. The teal color on the right is the accommodations and English language supports administration manual. We will, if you don't have enough, we will print some for you. So in your inventory of materials, I know that you get some of these sent to you. If you don't have enough, or if you want some extra, please let me know by tomorrow, because I need to get this turned around and out to you as quickly as possible, how many you would like. If you'd like 10 extra of each, let me know. And we will work on getting those printed for you and back to you as quickly as possible. So you should have enough in your materials, and as you inventory things, please count these. But if you don't, or if you want some extras, let us know. So also in the materials, you should find kind of a bifolded sheet of paper. Again, you see the different colors. In the upper right-hand corner is an S for standard and an A for accommodations and supports. These are the forms for paper testing. Jeff, I will have something different for you for the online portion of the test. This particular document, there are 4 sides to it, and it is really important that staff complete this because what gets sent back to ACT. You want to make sure that it's complete, because otherwise you'll have to fill it out before you send it back to ACT. What does it do? This is called a test room report. And on it, you will have information like, I'm looking at the standard time or paper, the red report, and it will have, for instance, when you give information or give material to a room, what are the serial numbers? What's the first and last serial number of the multiple choice test booklets? What are the serial numbers of the writing test booklets that you sent? So if you send a total of 15 to a single room, you should know the start and the end consecutive serial numbers that go on there. You fill that out and it says, I'm sending 015 of part A and 015 of part B, the writing, to that particular room. And then you are asked to sign or initial. So the room supervisor, the person who is giving it, says, yes, I got this, and you sign it or initial it and say, yes, I gave this. The flip side is, after they're done, they also have to say how many were used of each type and how many were unused, for a total that should equal what's in the upper portion. And so there are multiple things that have to go on, but again, you sign off on it that you received this back from them. They sign off on it that says, yes, I gave this to them. They completed it. So, I mean, this is the secure process that ACT goes through. If you were to open this up, a couple things that you would find. Number one, you're going to find a seating chart. And so you need to put down the student information. It has which test booklet each student gets. You need to write that information in, the multiple choice as well as the writing. Keep in mind that there's specific space requirements for seating students in rooms. They do look at this as well, because if there is, and we've had in the past, somebody gets an amazing number of answers, similar to the person who's sitting next to them. While it could have been coincidence, they catch those kinds of things, and they will then decide whether or not to. There will be an investigation, and they'll decide whether or not to invalidate the test. This happens every year, so it's really critical that you have where students are seated and which test booklets they have. Make sure that that's correct. There's also who is in the room. How did you know who they were? So you recognize them, or you have their photo ID. So there's a lot of information in these, and that's not something that's easy to make up once the students have left the room. So this is something that the room supervisor or a proctor does while the test is going on. Also, some things to consider. I will send you definitely in the Wisconsin ACT website is all the outline of training materials, and I'll highlight that and send that to you, as well as security agreements. But here are questions that you need to consider. We've already talked about number 2, the snack and water break, and number 3, are you going to serve lunch? Big one is number 1, how are you going to handle cell phones and wearable technology? So yes, Ben, that's a great question. I'll get to that in just a moment. Cell phones and wearable technology. So when we test students at the Alliant Energy Center for the Advanced Placement Test, we go through a process where they turn in their cell phones and wearable technology. So that includes smartwatches, AirPods. They need to have those taken out. They cannot be wearing those. Obviously the smartphones, etc. If they bring a tablet, that needs to also be put away. We keep that outside the test room. What I'm suggesting for you is that students either turn off the volume, put it on airplane mode for their cell phones, and turn off Bluetooth and set it on the desk. We have plastic bags with a name, an address label on it. So people put everything into the bag, write their name on it so they get their own phone back. Think about how you're going to handle that. I know students get very anxious when they can't see their cell phones because they don't want to lose them. So I would again encourage you to have them in the classroom, but it also opens up the situation for if a cell phone is not turned off, is not turned to airplane mode, then it's somebody texts or calls, it disrupts the classroom, and that has to be filled out on an irregularity report. So finally, transportation for that day is not going to be changed. So the buses, if students ride buses, that will be done in the morning the same way as it is today, in the afternoon, the same time. So students will not find transportation ready for them when they finish the ACT. If they do ride the bus in the afternoon and don't have a way home prior to that, they have to hang out until the bus actually comes. So you might want to consider where that takes place, because there will be students who are continuing to test into the afternoon. As Ben mentioned, those students who have time and a half or any other accommodations may take longer to actually test. And so you don't want to let students just wander the halls to make sure that they are in a particular location. Ben, your question was, what about different programs? Where are they going to test their students? Will they test at the large high schools or their home high school? Here's the answer. As we've done in the past, STEM Academy students will be expected to test with you, their primary enrollment, their school. So if you have students at STEM Academy, we'll be connecting you with their team, and I will tell them that they need to connect with you as far as where and when. But you need to say, okay, here are my students. What room do I want to have them in? So you need to plan for them. Other students at other location, Allison works with the IAE students, and so they are all going to be taken care of. Horizon High School students will be at their location. They are not going to be coming back to you, nor will any students who show up at Metro on that day. So there are programs. We need to think about night school. We need to think about other programs that are out there, and I'll work with Allison to make sure that we identify them. But if you've got a program you're wondering about, please email, or you can ask her right now and we'll figure it out. We'll make sure that
Madison Promise would be one.
Madison Promise, Andrew was on just recently and he just left the meeting. Madison Promise, if you have students there, they should be invited to either come into your school, or we need to figure out some other way of doing that. Testing can occur at an off-site, a neutral site location. They cannot test at home. Now, the reasons for testing or for being at Madison Promise vary and are very personal. So we'll have to reach out to these families to make sure that they understand that they cannot test at home. It's not a virtual, it is pencil and paper. And even if it was computer-based, they have to be in person to do this. If they choose not to come in to the schools, we need to figure out either they opt out at that point, or we need to find a separate location for them to come in.
And Gateway would be the only other that I have right now that I'm thinking about.
Okay, and Allison and I will typically work on that. Allison?
Yep, I will be testing at Gateway, Ben. So they actually have their spring break the week that we're doing it. So they will be testing on the makeup day at Gateway to College.
Okay, thank you.
So that also, for instance, in situations like this, we're going to have to, again, just keep track of those students who do not test the first date. It's a convoluted system as far as getting material for the April 9th makeup date, because there is one that is over our spring break. So we'll talk about that, and I'll get a process out to you as far as getting material for makeup. There are ACT recorded sessions on the DPI website. So if you are interested in any of those, there are recordings there. They're also listed in the Wisconsin ACT website. So in two places, DPI and the website. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. Let me just stop there before we jump into anything else and see if you have any questions about ACT.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, it's all me.
Oh, it's okay.
Training materials for our meetings with staff. Are you going to have those on your website?
Yes, I'm in the process of pulling them off of the Wisconsin ACT website, and I will have those on our website. I've not updated that yet. It will be updated, and I will email you. My plan is to get this done in the next 2 or 3 days. So by Monday, at the end of the day, I will email you and say this is up to date. It includes the PD, an outline of that, what materials you would need, etc.
And then just along the lines of staffing it, the people who are working the ACT, we don't have to pre-register them like we do the pre-ACT, so they have access to the online stuff. You just need to include them in the roster that you send and make sure that you train them, right?
Correct.
Services, Axel Hernandez, Ava.
Correct. So the pencil paper test is a lot less demanding on proctors as far as having to get online and do the testing. It also does not require you to pre-register them like it would be for like the pre-ACT Secure and when we move forward to the online ACT. So it's just they need to have those room forms. They need to sign off a security agreement. I'll have all of that set for you. What other questions do you have? Okay, then I'm going to continue on. If you do have questions, we'll be hanging out here for a little while afterwards, or you can always connect with us. So Dane County Youth Assessment, DCYA, is in the field right now. It is available to students. This happens once again. I've been through this again, but I just want to remind you, once every 3 years. This is really important because it takes about 30 minutes or so, plus the time to read the directions, 20 to 30 minutes, excuse me, for the survey itself, 5 to 10 minutes to read the directions. We have the window open until the end of February, 1st of March, and I can probably squeeze out another week if you need it. It's really important that students have the opportunity to take this because there are so many things that come from it. Millions of dollars in grants over the years and support specifically for students in your buildings. This is not something that happens and then it just disappears into the district. It is something that happens at your building. One of the things that I want to make sure of is that we get information back to you and your students this year. I know that it comes back very late, middle to late May, and we'll get that information out as soon as possible. There is a student created video, and this is also the letter, the parent letter that went out. I sent out a sheet for middle schools and one for high schools, and it turns out that, again, here's where you need to make a copy of a document before you make your own changes. It is a Google document, and that passive consent letter. Passive consent means you notify parents, and if they want to opt their child out of this survey, then they must say that. If they don't say that, it's assumed that the student, it's okay that they take the survey. I did send out yesterday, you should have gotten either today or will get tomorrow, a physical copy of the DCYA. At the high schools, it is a large document. This is not to be copied and sent out. This is not for giving away. This survey is a critical tool that is used throughout the county. Parents have the right to take a look at it, but they need to just leave it and view it there. They may not make copies. They may not take photographs of it. It is proprietary material that is produced by Dane County. So please make sure students have an opportunity to take this. There is a class link icon now set up. It looks like this in the bottom right. It says high school DCYA. It takes them not to the survey, but to a web page that lists all the high schools. They find their high school, click on it, and there is the link to the survey. The survey is available in English and in Spanish, and they make that decision how they want the survey delivered once they click into the survey. It's the first page that comes up is welcome. Would you like to take the survey in English? Would you like to take the survey in Spanish? So please keep in mind that it's kind of a two-step login process. The class link takes them to a web page, find your school, click on the button, and it takes you to the survey. So please let me know when. I would really appreciate knowing when you're doing this. And if you get done early, I'd like to know that as well. Okay, I apologize. That should not have said DCYA. It should have said PreACT. So we're only going to spend a couple minutes here, but I do want to give you a heads up, as this is information that comes pretty quickly. It happens at the same time as Forward and as ACT. I realize that, but this is critical information. And I know that I've used this slide from a Forward testing, and so the dates are not necessarily correct as far as when we pulled this information. But you are going to get a roster that will have the list of current ELs at your building and students who have an IEP or a 504. The purpose of this is that the students who have an IEP or 504, if there are not accommodations that they need for the testing, it notifies you. It'll be there and it'll say, hey, this is empty. Now, please keep in mind that there are also, in the creation of the IEPs, that process includes essentially a blank slate for the accommodations for pre-ACT. And so staff members can put nearly anything they want in there. That doesn't mean that this is also what students can get, because there are only certain things that are available on the pre-ACT, certain accommodations. Some accommodations, if you choose this, you cannot choose that. Some, I've heard of accommodations listed in student IEPs that are absolutely would invalidate the test, that are just absolutely not possible. So keep in mind that this is coming. We will work with your CC teachers and that entire team to make sure that they understand, but we need to have this back before you can begin the process of setting up sessions so that we can print tickets. So this is a multi-step process. Those of you who have not been through this before, the first part is ensuring that we have accurate information as far as accommodations for students with IEPs or 504s, and that we have accurate supports listed for students who are English language learners. Once we have that, we put that into the system. Then at the building level, you create sessions. You set up sessions, students in each session. It's almost like assigning rooms. And then we print tickets. So that's the process. So please keep in mind that you're going to receive this, and it will be due, I believe we've talked about March 8th. So it's going to come at everybody pretty quickly, but we are bound by the state as to when we need to get this. And if you want to get this in place so that you can do the sessions prior to spring break, these timelines are critically important. So I'm going to take a breath and see if there are any questions about this. Okay, go ahead.
Tim, actually, I have one thing to add. I know you're talking about pre-ACT here, but I just want to remind everyone that there's a similar process for forward testing that the deadline is today. So hopefully you're all aware of that. I think I emailed everybody that needed to know, but they are two separate processes because they have two separate sets of accommodations. So just note that what I sent in January was for forward, and what I sent on Friday is for pre-ACT, and anyone can reach out to me with any questions about it at any point.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that, because again, we're running multiple assessments and preparation for them at the same time. So if it looks like we're sending you a lot of things to do, we get it. Please reach out with questions. Know that we are very, very aware and attuned to the fact of what we're asking to be done and how much this is. But we also have deadlines on this side of it that we have to make in order to get this to happen for you. So, Ben, question: should no-show students be on your ACT roster? Yes, they should. As long as a student is enrolled, they should be considered your student, and so they should be on the roster. Obviously, if they suddenly show up, you don't want to say sit down and take a test, but they will need to be accounted for. So when the ACT is all done, the last thing we do, this is after the 9th of April, because that's our makeup date. After that, we need to determine why students did not test. There's a limited list of reasons, and so we'll have to go into the Pearson Access Next software and determine who has not tested and complete a not tested reason for each person. So it's really important to keep track of who has actually tested, both for ACT and pre-ACT, as well as the dynamic learning maps. So each one of these assessments we are expected as a district to explain why students did not test. All right. And speaking of dynamic learning maps, the process for dynamic learning maps continues. This is the alternate assessment for those students who cannot take the ACT because they are being instructed to the essential elements. This is not an easy assessment to administer. It's time consuming, we get it. But there is also the need to understand from the student's perspective, they need to have a way to show what they know, what they have learned. And this test will be different, obviously, than the ACT. However, they are being taught to a different set of standards, and so this assessment is aligned with those standards. It is not appropriate for students who are not being taught to the essential elements to take this. So if students are in irregular classes, or even if they are not in regular classes, if their IEP indicates that they are pointed towards Wisconsin Model Academic Standards, etc., then the ACT is the appropriate assessment. Pre-ACT for 9, pre-ACT secure for 10, and the forward test are all the same. So the dynamic learning maps, the DLM, is designed for only a few students. It should only be for a few students in the district. If you have questions about that, please let us know, and we can support you and your team with understanding that better. And I know this is a topic of our conversations on a regular basis as well. So, all right, we're just about done. Items of note. Again, the process for students to opt out. If families choose for a student to opt out, especially the ACT, but also pre-ACT secure or the forward test, the process is the same. It needs to be in writing. It can be an email. It can be a handwritten or typed up note. However it is, but it cannot be a vocal or verbal opt-out. So if someone says to you, I'm going to opt my child out, that's great, but they need to indicate that in a written format. And oftentimes it's families who you struggle to communicate with who may say that I have taken text messages, as long as you can assure me that that's the number and I can look that up and I see that it did come from this person, we can do that as well. All that information, whether it's a scanned document or an email, please forward to myself and to Jamie Anderson, and her email address is here on the slide, because not only do we report to the board, but this also helps us build out that not tested reasons within Pearson Access Next. So again, a lot of information coming at you today. Keep in mind that we are here to support you. And this is, again, the core team, but there's also a lot of other people around to support you as we go forward. So I am going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to stop recording so that if you have questions, we